The hospital room was sterile and silent except for the steady beep of monitors tracking vital signs. Elena Martinez stood in her street clothes beside the hospital bed where a stranger lay unconscious, while her mother thrust a pen and marriage certificate toward her. "Sign it, now," her mother commanded. Elena stared at the document, her hands shaking. "Mom, this is insane. I can't marry someone I've never met. Someone who's in a coma. You can and you will. Your sister was supposed to marry Alexander Hartwell next week. His family needs this marriage to happen for business reasons. Some clause in his grandfather's will about inheritance. If the wedding doesn't happen, his family loses everything. They've offered to pay off all our debts, cover your father's medical bills, give us $500,000. All you have to do is sign this paper." But Christina was supposed to marry him. "Why isn't she doing this? Your sister left the country yesterday. Ran off with her boyfriend to Europe. She doesn't care about this family. You're all we have left." Elena looked at the man in the hospital bed. Alexander Hartwell, heir to a pharmaceutical fortune, lay in a coma after a car accident 2 weeks ago. He wore a tuxedo. Clearly, someone had dressed him for this bizarre ceremony. His face was handsome but pale, peaceful despite the tubes and monitors. "This is wrong. He can't consent to this. His family has legal authority. They've consented on his behalf. And our family needs this, Elena. Your father will die without that surgery. We'll lose everything. Please." The hospital chaplain stood in the corner, looking uncomfortable but present to make the ceremony legal. A lawyer held additional documents. Alexander's parents waited in the hallway, desperate people making desperate choices. Elena thought about her father in another hospital across town, dying from heart failure because they couldn't afford the surgery. About her younger brothers who'd have to drop out of college if they lost the house. About the impossible choice between her conscience and her family's survival. She signed the marriage certificate. The ceremony was surreal. The chaplain read, "Vows to a bride in jeans and a sweater standing beside a groom in a coma." Elena repeated the words she was told to say, feeling like she was in a nightmare. She signed more documents. Someone placed a wedding ring on her finger and one on Alexander's unresponsive hand. "You're married now," the lawyer said. "Legally binding. The inheritance clause is satisfied." Elena's family received their payment. Her father got his surgery. The house was saved. And Elena became wife to a stranger who might never wake up. She visited him daily at first, sitting beside his bed and talking to the unconscious man she'd married. She told him about her life, her family, how sorry she was for this bizarre situation. The nurses said talking to coma patients sometimes helped. "I know this isn't what you would have chosen," Elena said on her 10th visit. "I wouldn't have chosen it either. But I hope you understand. My family was desperate. Your family was desperate. We're both victims of other people's choices." Weeks turned into months. Elena's life became a strange routine, working her job as a museum curator by day, visiting her comatose husband in the evening, going home to the apartment Alexander's family had provided for her. She was married but alone, committed to a person who didn't know she existed. She learned about him through his belongings, his family's stories. He'd been a doctor, specializing in infectious diseases. He'd volunteered in disaster zones, had developed treatments for rare illnesses, had been passionate about using his family's pharmaceutical resources for good rather than just profit. His family said he'd agreed to the arranged marriage with Elena's sister only to satisfy his grandfather's will requirement, planning to divorce after a respectable interval. 6 months after the hospital wedding, Elena was reading aloud to Alexander from a medical journal he'd published an article in when his hand moved. She froze. "Did you just?" His fingers moved again, a small twitch. Elena pressed the call button frantically. Over the next days, Alexander slowly emerged from the coma, confused at first, disoriented, with no memory of the accident or the months that followed. "Where am I? What happened?" he asked weakly. The doctor explained the accident, the coma, the recovery. Alexander's parents stood nearby, looking nervous. "There's something else you need to know," his mother said carefully. "While you were unconscious, we had to satisfy your grandfather's will requirement, the marriage clause. So we You what? You're married. We arranged it. To a woman named Elena Martinez. She was supposed to be your sister Christina, but Christina ran off, so Elena took her place. And Alexander stared at his mother in disbelief. You married me to a stranger while I was in a coma? We had no choice. The will, the business, everything depended on it. Where is she? This Elena person? She's been here every day, visiting you, talking to you. Elena was called to the hospital. She stood nervously in the doorway of Alexander's room, facing the man who was legally her husband but who'd never agreed to marry her. I'm Elena. I'm sorry. This wasn't my choice either. Well, I did technically choose it, but under terrible circumstances, and I know that doesn't make it okay. And if you want an annulment, I completely understand. Stop, Alexander said quietly. My mother explained. Your family's situation, the surgery, all of it. You were coerced. We both were. I'm still sorry. This is the weirdest situation imaginable. You visited me every day. I felt responsible. You couldn't consent to this marriage, but I could have refused to sign. So I thought the least I could do was keep you company. Over the next weeks, as Alexander recovered, he and Elena had careful, awkward conversations about their impossible situation. The marriage was legal. Annulment would be complicated because technically it had been consummated in a legal sense through the ceremony, even if not physically. We could divorce, Elena suggested. That was probably the plan with your original arrangement with my sister. Anyway, what if we didn't? Alexander said thoughtfully. What do you mean? I mean, we're already married. We both got forced into this by circumstances and family pressure. But we're also both free now to make our own choices. What if we gave this a real chance? Dated our own spouse. Saw if the marriage that started so strangely could become something real. Elena studied him carefully. You're suggesting we stay married and see what happens. I'm suggesting we start from zero. Hi, I'm Alexander Hartwell. I'm a doctor who apparently married you while unconscious. Would you like to have dinner with me and see if we actually like each other? It was unconventional, absurd even, but something about it appealed to Elena's sense of possibility. They were married. They might as well find out if there was any reason to stay that way. They dated. Dinner, coffee, museums, long conversations. They discovered they actually liked each other. Alexander was passionate about medicine and humanitarian work. Elena was knowledgeable about art and history. They made each other laugh. They shared values about family and responsibility, despite the bizarre circumstances that had brought them together. 6 months after Alexander woke from his coma, they had their second wedding ceremony, this time with both of them conscious and consenting. Renewing vows that had originally been spoken in a hospital room to an unconscious groom. At the reception, Elena gave a speech that made everyone think about choice and circumstance. I married Alexander in a hospital while he was in a coma, forced by my family's desperate circumstances and his family's legal requirements. It was the strangest, most uncomfortable beginning to a marriage imaginable. But sometimes the strangest beginnings lead to the most beautiful outcomes. Alexander and I both had our choice taken away. Then we got it back. And we chose each other, freely this time, knowing exactly what we were doing. That second choice, the one we made together, matters more than the first one that was forced on us. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe. Comment about a time when something that started badly turned into something wonderful.